Before we start recording today, let's have a word from our sponsors.
You own a cantina? Are you sick of all the fights and people destroying your place? Then this ad is for you. Get insured today. Planet Farm will insure your building, your speeder, and even your ship. Just go to planetfarm.com/Prism Podcast.
Hello everybody, welcome to Prism Podcast, a podcast where we talk about films and TV shows. Today we will be diving into The Mandalorian. I am your host, Amari Williams, and today we have a special guest, the one, the only, Nathan Bodecker.
It's me, Nathan Bodecker.
Alright, so this is our first episode, as you know. You excited?
Very.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Star Wars, The Mandalorian.
Awesome.
Okay, so our first point today is what contributes to the series' popularity?
All right. So what makes it intriguing? Well, I would say it would be the uniqueness of the genre, which is space western.
Space western takes place in a futuristic society that has elements of western genre or movies. So these movies typically combine components of action, crime, and society.
And in most movies, it shows the protagonist as the self-reliant outlaw.
So the main character in The Mandalorian, who is a bounty hunter, is said to be the best in the guild. And we clearly see that he doesn't follow the New Republic laws. Because, after all of the shenanigans with the imps, as they say.
Yeah, and we do see him break a criminal out of a New Republic prison ship.
That's true. There's an example in episode 3 where he questions, after he's rescued the child, or retrieved the child, I should say, he goes back after some thinking because obviously the encounter with the Mudhorn has made him realize that, hey, he saved my life, that kind of weighs on you.
Yeah.
And he goes back and saves the child. He risks his own life, and he's on the run with a bounty on his head. It's kind of ironic.
Yeah, and that's something we see from a lot of Western movies where this hero, this, again, self-reliant outlaw, will come into some town and end up helping those who can't help themselves. And we see that here with this young child who can certainly help himself a little, as we see him protect Din from the Mudhorn, but he's immediately weakened afterward.
So I have a quote from this editor. He has years of experience in New York publishing. He's made books. He has his own publishing company. And on his website, I found a writer. Her name is Rochelle Ramirez, and she quotes him. Sean Coyne says, "The Western story concerns the role of an individual in a mass society. Is the self-reliant individual dangerous to order or necessary to defend the powerless?" And I think that's a really powerful quote concerning with the relevance of, is the Mandalorian, is he dangerous? Is he supposed to be feared? Or is he, if he wasn't on that job, if he wasn't the best, would he have saved that life?
Right, and this quote really shows what the Western part of space Western adds to the genre.
Yeah. So, for example, you can see a little bit of that Western cowboy, those traits from the specific group called the Tribe. So, what do we learn about this group compared to what we learn in past movies, past series, books, and even video games?
Yeah, so we learn a little bit about them from the Clone Wars and the Rebels, but we still have a somewhat vague understanding of the Mandalorians in the day and age that we see them in The Mandalorian. We see that they only leave from their sanctuary one at a time, which is interesting. They're definitely trying to stay hidden, even though they are feared warriors.
Yeah, so a little bit of background from the Mandalorian. So we learned that they are feared warriors throughout the galaxy. They have a reputation as bounty hunters or even soldiers. And prior to the Old Republic, war led their way of life. They conquered worlds and, destroyed cities, claimed it their own. And in the Mandalorian, we see that they aren't that powerful group. We see that they're trying to stay hidden to protect their creed, as we learn it's called. It's not a race, it's not a religion, it's a creed.
Right. They also have a resource called Beskar, which is very sacred to them. It's used to craft all their armor, and it's very, very strong. And so that's a very important part of their Mandalorian culture.
Yeah, weapons are also forged with it. We see that a lot in the film, that he goes on this job, gets all of this Beskar, and we see that the client does say, it's nice to see that it's back to where it came from. I guess he's just trying to get maybe sympathy, or just trying to pull on the heartstrings of Mando.
Yeah.
So,
Another bit of Mandalorian culture would be the foundlings. The foundlings are people or children who are found by the Mandalorians and who are taken in and taught their culture. And we learned that Mando himself was at one point a foundling.
So in episode 3, we see his background, and it's in very little bits. I couldn't find a video that wasn't copyrighted, because obviously it belongs to Star Wars.
Right.
So I did find kind of like a description of the scene, and here it is. As she forges a replacement chess piece, the Mandalorian experiences a flashback of Separatist forces, including a droid gunship and battle droids bombarding his hometown. His parents reach a bunker, lower him in before sealing it, and he finds himself staring at another battle droid that opened his bunker, and it ends as the chess piece is forged. And I think it's in episode 7 where we see that flashback is finished, that we see Death Watch on his planet, and we see him be saved and taken to wherever.
And for those who don't know, Death Watch is led by many in the past.
Led by many, but we see it in Rebels, we see it in
Right.
Clone Wars, and Death Watch is, a very famous group. They've done a lot with with rulers when the Jedi was
At war with them.
Yeah, so that's really interesting to see that he could have a connection with that, and maybe in a later season we will see him dabble with some of those previous characters.
Right.
So at a Q&A, Dave Filoni, he is a very famous man in the Star Wars community. So Dave Filoni, he's known as an animator. He's a director, voice actor, television writer, producer. He's known for his work on Avatar, The Mandalorian, Star Wars. So he's very known throughout the Star Wars community. And actually, he obviously produced the Mandalorian, and at a Q&A he says that Mandalorians are notoriously the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and they'll fight you to prove it.
Yep, and we do see that in the show several times.
So we have a message from our sponsors before we get into the last topic. Fascinated by monstrous beasts? Are you sick of normal office jobs? Then you might be interested in becoming a wild beast tamer for the galaxy's very own Circus. Just go to galaxycircus.com/prism to apply. So, The Mandalorian takes place 9 ABY. That's after the Battle of Yavin / the first Death Star explosion. And after the Empire is destroyed, and in the series, the main character dabbles with an Imperial affiliator, which hints that they aren't completely destroyed. You see that the First Order rises from the ashes of the Empire.
Right, and we can see that several bits of canon lore throughout the Star Wars saga, even in games such as Battlefront 2, where we start to see some connections. But this really bridges a gap that we never get to see, which is once the Empire is sort of out of the war and is almost powerless, but is still clinging on.
With respect to Battlefront 2, you see the fall of the Empire right as it happens, after everything happened on Endor. After you see everything, happen on Endor and all of that, you play as different characters like Leia Organa and even Luke Skywalker, and it is canon, so it kind of, it gives you a little what's happening there. But The Mandalorian starts to bridge the gap and what it's like for other people in the galaxy, what it's like for, groups such as the Mandalorians and bounty hunters, and where did all the Imperial affiliators go after? Did they all die? Did they go and carry on with normal lives? Did they pay for war crimes? I mean, this definitely helps give a little bit more information.
It also gives us a bit more insight as to the culture of the Outer Rim.
Yeah.
Which is something that we get to see bits and pieces of throughout, but The Mandalorian really builds upon what we have already seen previously in Star Wars, and as well as adding some new welcome additions.
Yeah, and even in Episode 8, you see that they may not have political power, but definitely warlords and generals. They have that firepower of stormtroopers and backups, and even really, they have flamethrowers and really destructive weapons.
And I think even more powerful than that, they have organization. They have all these troops came from somewhere and are being led. So I think that's a really important point, is that clearly they still have some semblance of unity.
Yeah, and even, in past films, like in The Phantom Menace, you see that, the Republic has really no reign there. Their credits aren't useful. I mean, you can't expect to rule and dictate what everyone's doing, what you can deem legal and not legal on every single planet.
Right.
In The Force Awakens, the First Order built a weapon that is powered by the sun, and we witness that they destroy planets that are the core of the New Republic, that rule it, and that's how they begin their reign over the galaxy again. Right. And we also have a short audio clip from The Mandalorian, and I'll play that now.
And I'm not in the mood to play soldier anymore, especially fighting some local warlord.
He's not a local warlord. He's Imperial.
I'm in.
So we talked about the unique genres The Mandalorian provides, all the things we learned further about the tribe in the series, how it functions after all the destruction and political chaos in the galaxy, and lastly, how The Mandalorian gives information between the gap of Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens.
So now, after listening to this podcast, you can or cannot, we're not going to stab you with a lightsaber, but if and when you do rewatch the show and see and point out the characteristics of that sci-fi and that Western, and see if you can find little details that validates the points. If you see anything new about the Mandalorian group, any little Easter eggs and the new information you learn about after the Return of the Jedi. One last message from our sponsor. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Nathan, for coming on to my podcast and talking about Star Wars.
You're welcome.